Hey everybody, Frank Kern here, and today we're going to talk to best-selling author, multiple bestsellers, world-famous, world-renowned, Anthony Robbins, about his new book, Money, Master the Games, 7 Steps to Financial Freedom.
You remembered all that. I'm very impressed.
Well, you know,
That's a big amount to remember.
It is a lot to remember. It's a big book. This is no lightweight book here. This isn't like a passive, non-committal approach to taking
lift
control
weights with this baby.
of the. It really is.
Curls.
You know, on the way over here, I was thinking that culturally, money has gone from being like a taboo subject that you never talk about to really a national or global obsession, which is now openly flaunted and obsessed over. But it doesn't seem like the average person or really anyone has more control over the area of finance. In fact, it seems like we might have even gone backwards. So while the topic is now globally accepted and obsessed over, our education about it, our skill, our mastery of it is waning, if anything. What's going on here?
Well, part of that is complexity. I mean, the world you grew up in, I grew up in, or our parents at least grew up in, was very different, right? What'd you do for a living? You got to college, you got your 4-year degree, you went to work for a great company, you worked your tail off and got really successful. And at the end, you had all this money and you had this thing called a pension, a lifetime income. You never had to think about money again for as long as you lived. But, you know, that world died a couple decades ago. And so now we live in a world where everything is more complex. While you're in the middle of running your business and taking care of your children and being a great husband or wife and trying to do something in your community and have a good time, you're supposed to be, you know, investment expert simultaneously. And we all have heard over and over the phrase we've heard so often that, you know, when a person with experience meets a person with money, the person with experience ends up with the money, right?
Exactly.
And
right.
so that has happened on steroids because, you know, the technology of finance has grown geometrically. CDOs and CDMs and MLPs and WTF, you know, like, you know,
I don't know what any of those are.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
And so what I really wanted to do is, this really started for me back in 2008 when, I think you know my background. I grew up in a pretty tough environment financially and emotionally. And I associated so much pain in my family life to, you know, 4 different fathers and nobody had money. We didn't have money for food at Thanksgiving. And what changed my life was somebody coming and feeding my family then. And I've fed 42 million people since then, paying it forward. And I'm going to feed this year 55 million people myself. I just set a goal and I'm going to hit it this year. But to go from not being able to feed myself to being able to do that's been quite a trip. And in 2008, what fired me up was seeing so much suffering. Fortunately, I wasn't suffering, but I had the guy that cuts my hair, you know, I tell people my barber and my billionaire clients, because it's really true. Both extremes were suffering during that time. And everybody said the system was going to change. You know, everybody knows the system, you know, it's rigged and you read about how it's rigged and you know that you go to click on, you know, your E-Trade, let's say, and it takes you half a second to do that, 500 milliseconds. And today these high frequency traders are out there and literally in 1.5 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds, they'll buy and trade hundreds of times knowing what's going to happen to make money off you and everybody else. As soon as they know what you're going to buy it for, they just make money like clockwork. So the system we know is rigged and all this stuff was supposed to change. And in 2010, nothing had changed. And I watched a documentary that, I don't know if you've seen, but it's called Inside Job. Did you happen to see it?
I haven't seen it, no.
It's Matt Damon did the voiceover for it, won every kind of award. At the end of this thing, they literally systematically show you how the entire world economy was virtually blown up by a small number of people. And then the punishment we gave them was we put them in charge of the recovery and we took everybody else's money and made them whole. And at the end of this thing, I was so angry. I think you have one or two reactions. You're either depressed because you go, there's nothing I can do, I'm angry. And I thought, there's no solution here. And I thought, you know what? You know, the solution, there needs to be answers. And I thought, you know what? I have a privilege. Most people don't know it, but I've been coaching a man named Paul Tudor Jones, who's one of the top 10 financial traders on earth. For now, this will be my 21st year with him. He pays me 7 figures a year to coach him. So he's not looking for inspiration. I figure out what makes him successful. And for 21 straight years here, we've made money every single year. And I'm talking about, I was with him back when the stock market crashed in 2000, with him in the experience of 9/11, with him in the experience of the subprime crisis. Every single year made money. Nobody else in his class talks like that. So it's his skill. And I've been there side by side learning it and using my skills to help. And I thought, I've got access to the best financial people that exist on earth, those unicorns that make money no matter what happens. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go figure out what they do. So I set out to interview 50 of the most brilliant financial minds in the world, from self-made billionaires to Nobel Prize guys. And so I'm going to simplify it and I'm going to make this game winnable. And I really can say I've done that. Put it in this 7 simple step process that anybody can do if they're starting late in life, or if they don't have a lot of money, or if they're very successful and they want to take it to a whole nother level. I made this little course in mastery, basically, is what this book is for people.
It seems like today, especially, when it comes to money and finance, that people just devour information constantly.
Yes.
I mean, I was just up in your office. You've got 5 screens going on simultaneously, which is amazing, by the way. And there's different points of view coming across. And it used to be that information was this coveted thing of value. And then it became commoditized as we could just view every bit of information in the world on our telephone. And then it became, I think, really in terms of its relativity to finance, it became a bit of a hindrance because now there's so much coming on that you don't really know where to go. And I think what's really lacking now is insight. Don't give the manual, tell us the button to push. And it sounds like almost what you've created is a tactical, modern version, at least from the background essence of it, of Think and Grow Rich. But this is like Act and Grow Rich. Whereas you are now the modern day Napoleon Hill, where you've gotten to sit with these modern day Carnegies and just extract unbelievable amounts of insight from them. What would you say some of the biggest eye-opening moments were during that process?
Well, first of all, I want to comment on what you just said, because you said a lot, and it's really true. The biggest challenge today is not information. We are drowning in information. We're starving for wisdom. And what I wanted to do is you can go on the internet and you can get every point of view, and any person who's anybody will get up there and pound on their chest and attack each other and say, you're wrong, you're wrong. So I'm not interested in talking heads. Even on television, you have these financial entertainers that tell you, save your money and put in this mutual fund, this mythical mutual fund where you make 12% every year, compounded for 20 years. It doesn't even exist. It hasn't for decades. So I wanted to get to the truth. And I figured if you're going to master the game, you got to learn from the masters. And since I could get access to them, and I did it through relationship, and I did it through door opening, I did it by delivering for them, it just evolved. And what did I learn? My God, they all have different approaches, but I'll tell you a few things that they all have in common. And one of them sounds overly simplistic, but most people miss it. Their number one thing that every single one in common, and by the way, but here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I'm sitting with Carl Icahn, who most people have heard of, multi-billionaire with $27 billion. And I'm sitting down with him, and he made $2 billion that day on investment he started 18 months earlier called Netflix, right? He filed a tweet.
$2 billion.
Yes. He sent out a tweet that jumped Apple's stock value by $19 billion literally in an hour. Maybe it's $17 billion. I'm probably off by 1 or 2. But I mean, numbers that are just extraordinary. This is the level of influence this guy has. And by the way, all these interviews with these people are supposed to be 45 minutes, and you know me well enough to know I go deep. I prepare for 15 hours. And I go to Carl, and Carl's a very passionate guy, and he says, I don't want a video crew. Last minute. He just throws them all out. I'm like, I said, well, we'll at least audio record. No, I don't, because you got 15 minutes.
Right. No pressure at all.
So that turns into 3 hours, thank God, and we become friends, and it opens doors. So every one of these guys have a different approach. I met Ray Dalio, who most investors have never heard of. High-level investors all know who he is. Everybody knows what a hedge fund is. Big hedge fund, good size one, $15 billion. Ray Dalio is the largest hedge fund in the world, $160 billion. For you to talk to Ray 10 years ago, you had to have a $5 billion net worth, and you had to give him $100 million as your first investment, or you couldn't get in the game. Today, forget it. He doesn't care how much money you have. He invests for governments, China. He invests for the largest pension funds. So I got to sit with him for 3 hours, and I got him to share with me things he's never shared with anybody on earth, all the way down to an actual formula that has been right 85 to 86% of the time, whether you check it 30 years, 40 years, 75 years back. Think about how much up and down the market. Last 10 years, there's been 50% up and 50% downs back in 2000, 2008.
The past 10 months.
The most that he's done, the most he's ever lost was 3.9% in all those years, and that was 2008 when it was down 50% for everybody else. His average loss was 1.9%. So I always say to people, what if you could go to Vegas and you could know you're going to win 85% of the time, and when you lost, you're going to lose the maximum of 3.9% over 75 years. How much would you invest? How much would you go bet? How often would you do it 24 hours a day?
So you met with 50 of the most powerful, most influential, most successful investors, masters of money alive on the planet, arguably maybe even in history of this actual act of investing. What are the commonalities? Because surely there has to be some kind of a thread that ties them all.
There is. And it's interesting. Some of it seems very basic because the difference between information and execution is everything, right? So a lot of people know what to do, but they don't do what they know. These guys are incredible at execution. I'll give you a couple. First one, the most simplest one, they don't lose money. They're obsessed with not losing money.
That sounds a lot easier said than done.
It is a lot easier said than done, but their obsession is, if you know Warren Buffett has a rule everybody's probably heard. It says, rule number 1 of investing, don't lose money. Rule number 2, see rule number 1, right? Because when you lose in a 2008, 50% of your money, you have to make 100% to get even. And the time it takes to do that is sizable. So these guys are obsessed, I'm not going to lose. And they have all these strategies that I teach in the book about how to make sure you don't lose money, which doesn't sound sexy, but it's the difference between having a life where you're totally financially free and can do whatever you want at some stage of your life, or thinking about having to work at 50 or 60 or 70 years old in a place you don't want to be, right? A second one that's more interesting, is most investors, most people, A, are not investors. They never get in the game, right? They think investing's too complex, and it sounds like it, and it is if you let the words get in the way. If you know any field like law or medicine, they all have words that keep you as an outsider, and that's part of what they get paid for, right? But what I try to do is show people it's not that complex. If I show you what these words mean, if you hear the word iatrogenic in the medical field, I told you the Journal of Medical Association says that the 3rd biggest cause of death in the United States last year was iatrogenic causes. You go, what the hell is that, son?
I would immediately become paranoid and convinced that I have it somehow. I'm pretty sure this is definitely a form of Ebola. Yeah.
And, is that a tropical disease? Iatrogenic means physician-induced. The 225,000 people died last year, not because somebody didn't care, but in hospitals and physicians who have been distant. So the smartest people have gotten through that and figured out there's some basic fundamentals. So what do they have in common besides not losing money? Second thing that they really do is they look for something else. Big word, they call it asymmetrical risk reward. Okay, I'm lost. They make it simple. They look for how to take very, very little risk and get huge rewards. The average person
refers to rule number 1, really. That little risk goes right back to rule number 1.
It does go back to rule number 1. You catch it. Another guy I interviewed is a man named Kyle Bass. Kyle Bass took $30 million, gathered money together, a lot of money, but other people's money, turned into $2 billion in the middle of the subprime crisis.
That's a very big return.
You can say that in 2 years, right?
Oh my God.
So I'm like, how did you do this? It's historic. There's several books you read and they open up the chapter in some of the most historic books written recently. The gentleman who wrote Flyboys also wrote one of the books, and he starts out talking about Kyle Bass doing this incredible piece. It's like being there with him. But the way he did it was he risked 6 cents to make $1, and he just leveraged that up. Wow. So he could be wrong how many times and still break even? 15, he could be wrong 15 times and make money. So, but he's also smart as hell. He looked at things, he evaluated things. It's more detailed than I explained in the book, but the core they all have in common is they risk for valuable returns. I'll tell you a third they all have in common. Tax efficiency. What's the largest cost, what's the largest expense in your life? I should have asked you without saying it, but you can figure it out.
It's a no-brainer.
It's taxes.
Taxes, yeah.
There's nothing more expensive in your life than taxes. So I totally believe in paying my taxes. I feel like I can talk about this in a way that's more than fair. Your job, the IRS's job is to make sure they get as much tax from as many people as possible. That's their job. You don't want to be upset about it. That's their job. Your job is to make sure that legally and ethically you pay as little as you possibly can, because the difference between achieving your financial goals or not is you can earn more, but if you earn more and you're giving up 50 or 60%, it's going to cost you a lot. I'm going to give you an example. Compounding, right? So if you take $1 and you double it every year, first year $1, year 2 it's 2, then it goes 4, then 8, then 16, 32. After you double $1 20 times, it's $1,048,000. That's the power we see with compounding, right? It just explodes. What most people don't know is that costs compound as well. Fees compound as well. Taxes compound as well. So $1,048,000 if you double $1 20 times. If you just pay 33% tax each year, that's just the tax that you pay. What do you think you end up with? Because you read the book, but most people
it's depressingly small.
Yes.
Yeah.
People say, well, okay, if it's 33%,
you're like, maybe
you end up with $650,000 out of the million, or no, it's $24,000.
So you're only taking a $975,000 hit there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because you get now that's not how it works. Most people don't double their money every year.
Yeah.
It's just to make the point, because that's really what does happen with compounding. So you can turn compounding to your advantage as an investor, or you can turn it to your disadvantage. all these people. I was with David Swenson, who is the most successful institutional investor of all time. He's the rock star of that area. He's the Warren Buffett of institutional investing for universities. And he runs the Yale's endowment. And this guy's an amazing human being. He's taken them from 1 billion to 24 billion in 2 decades. I mean, and he said to me, he said, Tony, tax efficiency, tax efficiency, tax efficiency. For him, it's built in. He's university, right? Mm-hmm. So I went and found what are the things wealthy people, the 0.001%, it's not the 1%. They and ultra wealthy people and corporations know how to pay taxes efficiently, how to invest efficiently, so that you get a greater return from a smaller amount of money. They all have that in common. And then one more thing is they all know they're going to be wrong. Everyone. When I met Ray Dalio, he's made a 21% return for, I think it's now 23 consecutive years. 21%. And he says to me, Tony, the one thing I know for sure is I'm going to be wrong. I'm like, wow, Ray Dalio. I watch these guys on the internet. They're never wrong.
They're never, ever wrong.
The guys on TV, they're never wrong. You know, everybody else, I know the answer. And here's Ray Dalio, the Steve Jobs of investing, saying, I know I'm going to be wrong, so I build a system in place. That's why he gets that 85% return. So no matter what happens in the environment, even though I think how it's going to be, I'm wrong and I still make money. And in the book, was one of the things I'm most proud of is I'm sitting here with Ray, 3 hours into the conversation. Turns out he was a fan of my work for 20 years, which was really, really helpful. I've spent 15, 18 hours getting prepared for this so I can pitch and catch with him and go deep. And at the end of it, he's made it really clear that anyone can really win today. But you're not going to win by going to your traditional financial planner. You're not going to win by going to a wealth manager or broker. And he says it flat out. He goes, this is the biggest poker game on earth. And he said there's only a few guys that make money. And unfortunately, you don't have access to 99.999% of the planet. He said, but you can win if you develop what he calls a passive approach, where once a year you put together a formula or a system that will do well no matter what the environment is. And so he's very famous for generating this thing called an all-weather fund. And the all-weather fund is, he made all this money and continues to, and he said, but what if I pass away? I got 1,500 full-time people battling it out to find the best strategy that I implement. If I wasn't here, how would my family be supported? If I wasn't here, how would all my philanthropic efforts continue? And so he started looking at all these ideas that people tell you if you're going to invest and you got your 401k and you're getting older, let's do a balanced portfolio. Let's put half in stocks and half in bonds. And he said, well, that's supposed to protect you. But what happened in 2008? They all went down. And, you know, he can go through decade after decade where this happens. And so he said he figured out that there's a different way of doing asset allocation or deciding whether you have $1,000, $100, $100,000, $1 million. There's a division of where that money should go for you to truly be protected and do well. And he's done this for, if all his money's in it, all the money for his foundation and for his family's in it. And it doesn't require someone to be constantly doing something. But again, you've got $5 billion, you can get that answer, right? And so I can't even anymore. He won't take new customers on. So I said to him at the end, he explained the whole thing to me. I explained it in the book.
So he gave me
the entire description. But I said, at the end of it, I said, Ray, this is magical. People are going to be blown away. But the final detail that makes all the difference is the secret sauce, which is exactly what percent in this bucket of investments, what percent here. That's like Coke's secret sauce. I said, without the secret sauce, it'll help people. But it's not going to make them have the greatest return possible.
It's like the engine without the gasoline.
Yeah, and he said, well, Tony goes, I can't give you that. That's my secret sauce and $5 billion. I said, yeah, but you haven't taken a new client for a decade. And I said, you're giving away half your wealth anyway. He's got $14 billion. He's giving half of it away. I said, help the little guy out. Help the average guy out. Come on. And I started teasing him, cajoling him. And then he said, well, it's kind of complex. And I said, well, give me the simple version. He goes, well, I use leverage. I said, give me one without leverage that an average person could do. And as it's happening, I feel the excitement in my body going, I can't believe he's sharing this with me. It's incredibly generous of him, to say the least. And then I went to a group of financial professionals who went and did the testing on it, and they tested it the last 30 years. It's been one of the most volatile times, 40 years, and it's had 75 years, 85 to 86% success every single time in that period. As I told you, most money ever lost was 3.9, average loss 1.9%. It dwarfs anything you've seen. So you could get a bigger return with bigger risks, but that's on paper.
Yeah.
This is another way, everybody says, past results don't guarantee future results. Legally, everybody says that. I'd say that. But this guy's designed something designed for any marketplace. It's like any season that's going to affect you, he's done it. And so a bunch of my friends said, turn this into a business. Like, don't put this in the book. You can't let somebody go get a book for, $28, $25 and do this. And I said, the spirit was offered was for everybody to get it. So it's in the book. And if somebody wants somebody to implement it for it, there's a team of people that'll do it, but you can do it yourself.
So you're with Ray Dalio.
Yes.
Steve Jobs of investing.
Yes.
Arguably one of the greatest in history.
Yes.
And he discloses the formula.
Yes.
Were you ever thinking, okay, this, surely there has to be more to it than this? Like, how did you verify the efficiency of it?
Well, I went back and I worked with a couple of different groups. Hightower was one of the groups. They're one of the largest registered investment advisors in the world. There's another group called GemStep, and I just had different groups go test it because I would have multiple examples there. And they all came back with the same result. I mean, the rule is the rule. It works the way it works. And the most amazing thing, though, is that...
Well, how did they test it? Because, see, my brain would say, well, this, of course it works for him. He's got the magic power, right? Because I think we all sort of default to that. Well, of course you can do it because you're you, but I'm just a normal guy.
No, the magic power is figuring it out. Knowing the exact percentages is what he knows, and he revealed it. I mean, he just shared it. I mean, it's incredibly generous. I mean, obviously, and some people around him weren't terribly excited about it afterwards, but he stuck to it, which is quite amazing. He could have overruled it and said, I don't want this going out, but he wants the average investor to be able to have an opportunity, and he knows they're not going to get it from the average person they're going to go. Even somebody with good intentions who's really there. He said, your financial advisor, he said, might be sincere, they might be caring, they might be honest, they might really care about you, they might invest their own money the same way they're telling you. He said, but how many gold medals have they won?
Mm-hmm. They could still be wrong.
And he said, I'm going to be wrong at times, but he said, I win gold medals. And he said, and so he figured that formula out. He laid it out. And then he's not the end all be all. There are many. This book, I've got 50 people sharing with you their best formulas. The question I asked them all was, if you couldn't pass on any of your money to your children, only a set of strategies or a portfolio or an investment insights, what would it be? What would you do? And so I have them from all these different people in the book as well. There's never been a book in history. It's very much like Think and Grow Rich, where, as you said, Napoleon Hill went and interviewed all the most successful people in the world. And he was looking to find out what was it. It was their desire. It was their hunger. It was their mastermind. It was transmuting sexual energy, if you know the book and how he describes all these principles. What I want to do is go beyond the psychological side and go to the actual where they put their money strategy. I want to get their brain too, but I want to know what it was. And that's what this book is filled with. So if you want to know what Carl Icahn does, you can see, and you can see how to invest with Carl Icahn. If you want to know what a Ray Dalio does, you can actually see. If you want to know what Paul Tudor does to become successful and have, now it's 28 straight years he's actually made money, never losing, then you can actually open the book and find it. It's pretty unique. And you don't have to be some complex investor. You can be a soccer mom just getting going. You could be a kid who's in debt coming out of college, and you learn the steps. It's 7 steps. You learn each step, little step at a time to do, that'll take you from where you are to where you want to be financially, but it uses the best on earth as the basis of how to do it.
So you're with arguably Ray Dalio, the greatest investor in history, or certainly one of them. Yes. And you have gotten this information from him that no one has ever been able to get, which doesn't surprise me at all, by the way. It's like, of course, you would be able to go over there and get him to tell you this. So he gives it to you, and then what do you do? Because my mind would immediately go to, well, he's given me this information, but of course he can do it because it's him. He is like Superman of this, but how did you, I don't want to use the word verify because it would be doubting this person's ability, but how did you reassure that the average person could apply this and have success?
Well, I went to several different financial institutions and said, please take this formula and apply it back 30 years, 40 years, 75 years, and let's see how it did.
What's that mean, though?
That means they go back and every year there's a return on each of these assets, the bonds, stocks, et cetera, commodities, and they know exactly what it is historically. So they say, if I had this percentage of this percentage of that, what was my return? Did I lose money?
Did I make money? He did, according to this formula, for the past 75 years?
75 years.
And what happened?
It's unbelievable. The overall average over 75 years is just under 10% return, so beating the market. And an interesting part of it, though, was you didn't have the volatility because he didn't lose money. So 85% of the year, 85 to 86% of the time, depending upon what time period, but with only a 1% difference, it was successful and made money. By the way, in the 15% where it wasn't, sometimes it lost money 0.003%, which means you really broke even. But we call it losing money because it didn't make money, right? So,
what was the worst?
The worst was minus 3.95, which means less than 4%. And that was 2008 when from top to bottom the market lost 51%.
He still beat the market.
It destroyed the market. He did way better than the market. So, and that was the worst year. The average loss was 1.9%. So, I mean, that's what I try to say to someone. I was mentioning to you, if you go to Vegas and someone said, go play blackjack, go play whatever you want to play, you're going to be absolutely guaranteed to succeed 85% of the time over the last 75 years, there's no guarantee the future will be the same as the past. But if the only time you're going to lose 1.9%, I think you'd probably gamble relatively. So this is not a gamble. I don't tell people put all your money here. I show people there are many strategies. This is just one that's mind-boggling in how it's performed over such a long period of time.
So, today, you mentioned it earlier, today you really cannot turn on the news or browse the internet and not see either an ad about how everything's horrible, hear a story about how everything is horrible, or hear someone complaining about how everything is just terrible from a financial perspective, from an investment perspective. And I think there's a tremendous amount of fear in the world. And I think this is for a good reason. I don't think it's foolish fear. I think it's either manufactured by media or reactionary fear to recent events. So with that said, and knowing that so many of us have just been clobbered over the past 5 or 6 years from a financial standpoint, whether it's seeing 401ks dissolve or jobs go away or anything. How does someone have the confidence, and what would like a first step be for someone saying, you know what, I've had enough. This is the end. Today's the day I'm going to turn it around and take control. Where do they begin?
You got to decide whether you're going to accept it as it is. And if you do that, your fate's sealed. Or if you want to still win. Because in spite of everything you've heard, the game is totally winnable. And the guys that know how to win are the ones I went and interviewed. And I got a 7-step plan from them, one step at a time, that you could do starting from nothing and get where you really want to go. But you also have to remember, when you look at the news is not designed to inform. The news is designed to startle. That's how you sell something for the news, right? I got to get your attention. And there's so many things in your pocket around you getting your attention. So Ebola, 32,000 people die every year of the flu. One person has got Ebola. Oh my God, we're all going to die of Ebola. And the news jumps on it 24/7. So you have to be able to separate yourself. And the way you separate yourself is you start to feed your own mind. Because if you don't, weeds are automatic, right? My teacher, Jim Rohn, used to teach me that. So what I started doing is saying, I need to get around the people that are succeeding and find out what they think. Are they freaked out, or do they see opportunity? And some of the investors one of them passed away a few years ago that I interviewed for this book. One of them is a man named Sir John Templeton, and he made all his money at times he called maximum pessimism, and we're far from that. Maximum pessimism is World War II when, Hitler invades Poland and everybody thinks the world's over. That's when he made his most money. When Japan was hit with, nuclear bombs, that's when he made his most money right afterwards, because people think bad things are going to go on forever, and they think good things are going to go on forever. Wherever they are, that's where they think life's going to be. So the answer to your question is, you got to get in the game. And I was talking to a friend of mine who also works in one of my companies just the other day, and he was telling me something very similar to what you said. He said, look, I consider myself to be passionate about investing because I'm committed to getting my family to be financially free. But in 2008, I got clobbered. I lost almost half of all my assets. He said, it just nailed me. And now, he said, I've missed the last 5-year bull market. When everybody's talking about how bad it is, the market has been going straight up like this. Now, a big part of that's been manipulated by the Fed, but without even knowing that, he missed out on some of the biggest growth of his life because he didn't know what to do. So here's what I told him. What if there was a way, because ultra-wealthy people have this, and I explain it in the book, where you could have been in the stock market, but you would have been guaranteed not to lose a dime, and you would get most of the upside, not all. Some cases 80%, some cases 90%. Would you have been in? He said, of course. Well, I said, that's how wealthy people invest. That's that part I talked to you about of take the least amount of risk for the greatest possible reward. Mm-hmm. And there are tools like that are available. But I think really what people have to first do is to figure out how they can win. And what I do in the book is I say, let's take it a step at a time. And the first step is you got to get in the game. You got to understand how to tap the power of compounding, as simple as that is. And most people have heard about it. They know it. But tell me, what did you experience when you started to read about that?
I wish you hadn't asked me the video. I'm embarrassed to tell you. I'm 42 years old. I've had a great career.
Still made a lot of money.
Never even fully comprehended what compound interest was until you told the story of the two brothers.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, well, either I am disproportionately ignorant or we as a society really just don't know the basics of how to make money. And there's another great point you made in the book, actually, which is we believe that if we want financial security, we just simply keep performing, run on the hamster wheel even faster. But the compound interest, the facts of compound interest and the way you presented compound interest really is a significant eye-opener. which immediately made me wish I had a time machine. It was like, why didn't you write the book 20 years ago? I'd be done. We would be having who has the biggest helicopter contest right now.
Well, everybody's heard of compound interest. Most people understand it intellectually, but they haven't got in their gut to really what it means, or they'd act on it. Because you talk to Warren Buffett, and he said, "How'd you become wealthy?" He said, "Good genes and compound interest." That's it. It's like time and compounding. Most people think a delusion. And a lot of clients, and your industry and my industry as well, have done it. They're like, how can I get rich overnight? How can I go make this big hit? And if you look historically at the people that made the most income, most of them, not all, but most of them, don't hang on to it. Because if you look at, a Kurt Schilling, right? Guy wins 2, Major League Baseball World Series, Red Sox history, makes $100 million. He's bankrupt right now. I lost it all. You look at somebody like Michael Jackson, made more money than anybody knows. He passed away, but when he passed away, he was upside down in his estate. You look at Mike Tyson. My God, Mike Tyson made $500 million in income and went bankrupt.
That almost seems like you would have to try to do that.
Well, you'd be surprised. Most of us, all of us, average person, the more we earn,
the more we spend.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they don't realize, buy an island, buy a plane, it goes so fast, and people have no clue that it's there. So what really does work is compounding. And the example you gave was, I sat down with just a brilliant man, Burt Malkiel. He wrote a book called Random Walk Down Wall Street, which has been like one of the top investing books for like 20, 30 years. He's a Princeton professor. And he created something called introduced the idea of indexing, where you didn't have to buy all the stock market. You could put a little money in and get a piece of everything. As a gross generalization, I'd explain it really quick. But he told me the story. He says, "Tony, most people know compounding." He goes, "Oh yeah, I know compounding." He said, "But they don't use it because they don't get it. It's tapping the ultimate power." He said, Einstein called it one of the greatest discoveries of the human universe, right? Because here's what happens. He gave me the example. He told me the story that you read. It's the story of 2 brothers. He said, one brother starts at 20 years old, and he puts aside $4,000 a year. That's it. And he puts it in the stock market where it's grown 10% a year, and he's not being taxed. He has it in a tax-deferred environment. And he does that from 20 to 40. And then he stops investing. His other brother doesn't start till he's 40, and he goes from 40 to 65. So they both put in an amount of money, but the guy went from 20 to 40, did 20 years of investing at 4,000. The guy that was 40 to 65 did 25 years of investing. More money on the guy on the right side here, spent more. William and James will call him. James started when he was 40 and went to 65. At the end of their 65, when they both hit 65 and it's time, let's say, to start tapping into the income of this, one man who started earlier and put less money in, right, William, he's got $2 million available, 2.5 to be exact, and his brother's got less than 500,000.
That's amazing.
A $2 million difference.
And it's simple math.
It's simple math.
What did Einstein call it? The single greatest discovery of mankind?
One of the greatest discoveries.
But as a society, we've trivialized it. It's like, oh, no, that's just for old people or something who have gazillions of dollars. We need to try to find the hottest tech stock to sink all of our money into and do this. And maybe sort of use the right combination of affirmations and visualization to make the stock go up or something. But it's phenomenal.
It's truly phenomenal. I mean, he gave another example to me was Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin in 1790, I think it was when he passed away in the late 1770s, he left to $1,000. That's it, just $1,000 to his 2 favorite cities, Philadelphia and Boston. But he had instructions in his will that the money would be left in the market and would grow, and it couldn't be touched for 100 years. At that point, they could take out half of it and then leave it in for another 100 years, whatever the difference was. The $1,000 grew. They took out half, $500,000, 100 years into it, both of them, which was a nice size return for a $1,000 investment. But in 200 years, it was worth $6.5 million for each city. I mean, $1,000.
$1,000.
Growing over that time period. So it's a 3,000% return. So it's amazing. You can have almost no money, and if you give it a little time and you invest it in the right balance, we don't lose it. Remember, we talked about that. The kinds of returns that people can get is just astronomical. You could go out, people say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't have the money to invest. And I said to people, I said, give up one of your nights out that you're going to go to dinner and have a pizza instead and save $40 this week. Do that 4 times a month. $40 a week, $2,000 a year. Grow that at 8%. Do it over 40 years, and you got $500,000. I mean,
that's serious business.
For the average person, that's a number that would be amazing for them. Considering 1 out of 3 baby boomers has $1,000. That's what their total savings is today. 1 out of 3 baby boomers.
That's very scary.
It's mind-bogglingly scary. 77% of our society, almost 80%, 77%, says they have major financial stress and less than 40% have any kind of a financial plan. It's mind-boggling. So this is an area that nobody wants to look at because we think it's too complex. And it's made complex by jargon and by language. And what I've really tried to do is just cut through all that and say, let me just show you, it's really not that hard. There's some fundamental things you can do literally 15, 20 minutes over the course of a year. And nothing in this book is my ideas. Like, it's not, well, here's Tony Robbins' financial plan. Who does he think he is? Well, for 21 years, I've coached one of the top financial traders literally in existence who's not lost money in those entire years. B, I've got access to everybody. But C, I didn't put what I thought. Emotionally, like what to do psychologically, that's my skill set for, 36 years. But what to do financially, none of it is from me. It's all from the best on earth. I just made it simple enough for you to actually follow through and take action on it.
All right, so step one, if I'm interpreting you right, is accurate thinking.
Well, really, step one is stop being a consumer and become an investor, and that you don't need a lot of money to invest. That what you really have to do is decide on a percentage of the money you have that you're going to invest. And for a lot of people, they say, Tony, I can't do that. I can't put aside 10%. I can't put aside 15%. If you don't, what's ahead of you, a lot of years ahead of you, is going to be so painful. You don't want to be in that place. But better yet, why not create great quality of life now? I met with Shlomo Bernatzi and Richard Thayer as his partner, who's a Nobel Prize winner. And they came up with the coolest system because they're behavioral economic guys. You go, oh my God, what the hell is that? They study how our natural behavior screws us up financially and how to avoid it, how to get ourselves out of that trap. And one of the things they came up with is people say, I have no money to invest. I can't. I'm spending every dollar, which most people are. And they said, how about we do this? He said, we have this mindset in our mind that we're going to do things in the future differently than we do today. We feel good about it. If I asked you, do you want next week, we're going to have a meeting, we're going to have a party. Do you want to have chocolate or do you want to have, some really good healthy food? And you might say really healthy food until we get there 2 weeks from now and you change your point of view when you see the chocolate. So what he did was he came up with a strategy called save more for tomorrow. Here's what it is. Let's say you're only going to save 3%, 4%, 5% today. But you make a deal at your company that every time you get a raise, that 3% of that raise of your money is going to go into what we call your freedom fund. This area where you're going to make investments and eventually grow to a point where you are financially free, where you don't have to work another day of your life because your investments provide an income that replaces the income that you used to get from working. And I show people exactly how to do that. But what's cool is they did this with a group of blue-collar workers. And in 12 years, these are guys that normally don't make much money at all. Most of them started with 3 or 5% savings. They were saving by the end of this thing 16%. Now, when you start saving 16%, it starts compounding.
That's serious.
You get totally financially set. I mean, you get where you'll have lifelong financial stability, financial freedom, and we show you how to do it. And it's all automated, so you don't think about it. The best way to make sure that you invest is pick a percentage and automate it so you never see it. It goes into your freedom fund, and then later in the book we show you how do you decide where that money goes so that you can build enough money that you stop making the worst trade of your life. Let me tell you what that trade is. Trading time for money. Mm-hmm. Most people don't think of themselves as a financial trader, but they are. They're trading time for money. You want to trade instead money for money. You want money to become your slave. You want money while you sleep to go to work for you. And no matter how hard you work and no matter how much you work, it's still you until you make money your slave. And so this process, step one, you stop being a consumer, you become an investor by deciding a specific number you're going to set aside and you automate it. We'll show you how to do that as the first step.
What's the next one?
Step two is you got to know the rules before you get in the game. We say this all the time, and I'm sure you've seen it. Anytime somebody with money meets somebody with experience, the person with experience ends up with the money. It's just how it works. So I teach people 9 financial lies that have been marketed that systematically rob you of your economic well-being. And so it's like, if you're going to get in the game, you got to know what the insiders know.
That is a really heavy statement. 9 financial lies that systematically rob you. There was 9 lies that systematically rob you of your financial well-being. That's worth probing a little bit if it's okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. What are they? Because now I'm like, I've got to know what this is. That's a big deal.
Well, I'll give you a sample. Where do most people, the average person, they work their tail off. They have some money maybe in a 401k. Mm-hmm. Where do I put that money? I don't know. What do you think? Let's find a 5-star, Morningstar, maybe. What do you think? What should we do? There's no understanding whatsoever what it means. And because of that, you also don't understand the fees involved. Mm-hmm. And you might say, I'm getting paid 1%. There's 1% fees. That's what somebody will advertise or tell you. But they don't know there are 17 other fees that have different names that you have to be able to read a 52-page prospectus and understand. There's a man named Hilton Smith, this guy's got a degree in economics. And here's a guy, you talk to him and he'll tell you he had, I don't know, I think he had 5 or 6 different mutual funds with all these different, agreements. And so this guy's got a degree in economics, and it took him 2 weeks of reading, digging, trying to figure out what these words meant to find out that in fees alone, this is somebody that's making, at this time, I think he said the average person who makes $30,000 a year, and most of your listeners and viewers are way beyond that. Mm-hmm. They're giving up $150,000 in fees just over the life of their investment. Somebody in your category, it's more like $500,000 to $1 million in fees, because the difference between a 1% fee, a 2%, a 3% fee sounds like nothing. But remember compounding again?
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
So I'll give you an example. If you put $1 million aside and you're going to grow it over 30 years at 8%, and you say, I'm paying 1%, 2%, or 3%, the person who pays 1% is going to have $7.6 million. The person who pays 3% is going to have $4.3 million. You're going to have 75% less money. So if I said to you, here's the deal. How'd you like this investment, Frank? How about you make an investment, and here's how it'll work. You give me the money. You take all the risk. If we go make this investment together, I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to direct it for you. In the end, I'm going to put up no money, and I'm going to take no risk, and I'm going to end up over the life of your investing with about 40 to 60% of your total return. I take no investment risk. I put no capital in. And if you lose your money. But if you win, I win. Would you take that investment?
I would not. And I think whoever's doing that is very, very good at selling themselves.
That's called a mutual fund.
Seriously. So
because what's happening is when you have fees, the average mutual fund fee, if you check out Forbes, they'll show you. I interviewed the guy who did it. 3.1% is the average real all-in fees, not the expense ratio, which is the language that you probably don't even know, but they tell you, your fees are just 1%. 3.1% is the average. So when you do that, every 1% is worth 20% of what you accumulate over a lifetime of investing compounded. So 3 is 60%.
That's serious.
It's mind-boggling. Who'd make that investment? Most people wouldn't, but they don't know. It's too complex. I'm so busy. What should I do? Here we go. What you don't know will hurt you. What you won't know will take your financial wealth. And so one of the things I did is I want to make it simple. Let me just show you not only what to do, but what not to do is just as important, because it'll give you financial freedom. And so I have 9 of these. So one of them is fees matter. And I show you just quickly how to be able to do it. And I even have a site now. I went to an organization, amazing organization, that is a registered investment advisor. That means they are legally required to put your needs ahead of their own. Mm-hmm. If you go to a wealth advisor, a broker, there are 310 different names for that position, by the way. It's a salesman who works for a big bank. Their job is to sell you their products. If you go to a Toyota, they're going to sell you a Toyota, not a Cadillac and not a Volkswagen. So people don't realize that somehow. They think this person, because they're sincere and they care, most of them, and they may even invest their own money the same way, they know what to do. They're part of a captive system. Mm-hmm. So a fiduciary is a big word, or registered investment advisor, words most people will be overwhelmed by, is somebody whose job it is they only get paid, not commissions, only get paid to serve your interest. And they can pick from anything. So I went to one of the largest registered investment advisors in the world, a group called Hightower. They have $30 billion in assets, but they only serve, the wealthiest people in the world. And I said to them, I met with the founder, his name's Elliot, brilliant man. And I said, Elliot, you care so much about full transparency, people not being cheated, fees, ripping out and stripping out all the fees, showing what's real, but you're helping the wealthiest people in the world. How about the average person? The average person, 50% of the United States has less than $25,000 of assets. He said, Tony, I'd love to help them, but you can't make money doing that. I said, you don't need to make money. You're making plenty of money. I said, how about, and I introduced him to a person who's been working and managing my assets for about 7 years now, a man named AJ Gupta of Stronghold. So why don't you guys come together and use technology and create a way for people to go online, be able to put in whatever they have in their accounts and have it automatically show them what they're really paying. Most people have no clue what they're really paying versus what they could get the same stock or bond for. A lot of times you'd be paying 10 or 20 times more to buy the same stocks or bonds in your mutual fund that you could have in something called an index that costs 30 times less, 20 times less, 10 times less, exact same product. But you'll know that the minute you click the button. I want them to know. I said, why don't you design it so they can immediately see how much exposure they have? What's the volatility? How about you make it so you can compare it to other choices? What's their real return for their investments? Most people have no clue. Show it to them in seconds and do it for free. He said, well, how do I make money? I said, some of the wealthier ones will become clients of yours. The ones that aren't, you show them how to do it, and hopefully they'll grow and become clients. So based on the goodwill, those two groups, Stronghold and this group Hightower, have come together and formed this. And it's kind of like test your broker, take your broker for a drive. So you can find out these things I'm talking about by pushing a button.
You don't have to spend 3 weeks
an
economist reading the...
Yes. And I'm proud of the role that I played in putting these guys together, to say the least.
That's incredible. And the tool is readily available
online now
for everyone who has the book. That's outstanding. Dude, this is horrible. Because I'm hearing you, and I have been ignorantly happy with what's going on with my financial situation.
Well, you know what's interesting? You're one of those people. You found a way to add so much value to people's lives. You've earned enormous amounts of money. But as you well know, then there are tough financial times. And it may not even be your business. It might be your personal life. It might be, something that happens for somebody you care about, you need money for. And if you don't have a system, I call it a money machine. If you aren't building a money machine that makes money while you sleep, you've done that with business to some extent. But how'd you like to have a business with no employees, no overhead, right? You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. That's what this money machine is. But you got to get in the game. But you can't get in the game first. You got to get started. You got to decide you're going to be the investor. Then you got to understand the rules of the game. Now you get in the game so you can start to begin to win.
During this whole conversation, so I've started out in 1999. I had $10,000 and I gave it to a friend of mine who was a year behind me in high school. And I was, 27 or something. And he's like, Kern, baby, I'm a stockbroker now. Give me some money. And I'm like, I've got extra $10,000 here. Take it. Puts me in a mutual fund, 90% lost. So, which was normal. He was like, yeah, well, that kind of is expected. I'm like, great, this is wonderful. So then never invested again up until maybe 10 years ago. And my mother is someone. And so I just use who she used because we didn't lose all the money. That was the criteria, is I can take some money and put it in whatever, give it to this person, and my tax benefits are slightly better, and she won't lose it. And she didn't lose it, which is great. So we've made probably, I don't know, $75, $80 on the investment over time. And so this whole time I've thought, well, you must be magic in order to actually find success at this. And I'm thinking that my belief system has been ignorant at best, based on absolutely
you've been based on it. It's been based on your real experience. One of my first investments, I lived in Marina Del Rey. I'll never forget. Young guy, just getting going, and this beautiful blonde woman pulls up in a brand new Rolls Royce in Marina Del Rey, and she's getting all this cleaning. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "What do you and your husband do for a living?" I'm obviously asking for two reasons as a single male at that time, right? She goes, "My husband and I, we have this company," and she told me what the company was. We're a penny stock, and I went home and put all my money in penny stock, and I understand she had the Rolls Royce and why I didn't. Right? Yeah. She was a great marketer. No, most people don't make money investments. It's like I tell people, I say, I'm not stupid. Most people are not physically fit and strong and healthy. Most people don't have a passionate relationship that 10 years later is still alive and loving and passionate. Most people are not really happy and out of their mind with their job. Most people don't make money in their business. 96% fail in a 10-year period. Most people don't do well investing. Most people don't, but I'm interested in the few that do. And I'm interested in knowing what they do, and I'm obsessed. I'm a hunter of human excellence, and I've spent a 4-year hunt to find the very best people on earth and say, what do you do? And now, how do I get that to be something that an average person can do? How do I make sure they get access to those things? So it isn't just something rich people you read about do. I could do this with $100, $1,000, $10,000, whatever the case may be. I have a woman that works with me that has sailed around the world twice, and around Cape of Africa. I mean, some brutal things. She is one bright, strong, incredible lady. But she's a disaster in finances till she was working with me on this book, and I had her be my reader. I said, read this, I want to see if you get this. And I was bouncing off of her. But I mean, in the first 5 chapters of the book, we're reading it, she had a brand new car. And I'm like, what the hell happened? She goes, I did all my expenses. I figured out what I'm spending here. I can have a better car based on this interest rate, and I still have more money to invest. And I've watched her life change. She's got a plan now. She's 43 years old. She'll be completely financially set in the next 10 years, 9.5 years. She's got the plan laid out, knows what to do. She's always been a smart woman, but who's going to coach you to do this? Who's going to open the door? You're not going to see Ray Dalio. You're not going to meet the few guys that beat the market. I mean, here's one for you. Another lie. 96% of mutual funds, 96% don't match the market, meaning they're not the same as if you just bought what's called an index. An index is just a piece of all the biggest companies, for example, in the S&P, the Standard & Poor's. you don't have to spend any money to buy that index, like 0.20%, not 3%. And you get the same companies, Apple, all these great companies. 96% of mutual funds over a 10-year period don't match that. So what does that mean? It means only 4% succeed in a 10-year period, and the 4% is always changing. So let me help this for anybody listening. So they go, oh, it's math. No, what do you mean?
What is this math business of which you speak?
Let me show you. Watch this. So I'll give you an example so these numbers come to life for you. If 96% of the chances you're going to pick the wrong mutual fund, you only got a 4% chance of succeeding, right? That's major league gambling. So let's say you play blackjack, and anybody's played blackjack, it's 21, right? And you get two face